The topics and opinions expressed in the following show are solely those of the hosts and their guests and not those of W4CY Radio, its employees, or affiliates. We make no recommendations or endorsements for radio show programs, services, or products mentioned on air or on our web. No liability, explicit or implied, shall be extended to W4CY Radio or its employees or affiliates. Any questions or comments should be directed to those show hosts. Thank you for choosing W4CY Radio.
Welcome to Life with Open Pages. We all have a purpose in life. Sometimes we just need a little motivation to point us in the right direction. This show is designed to help you create the life you were meant to live. I'm your host, Michelle Bannister. My goal is to motivate you to make simple life changes so you can experience a life with meaning, direction, love, and peace. Now let's start the show.
Hello and welcome to another episode. And no, you're not seeing things. I did change my last name. I did not get married. I went back to my maiden name of Michelle Bannister. So tonight, we're going to talk about many challenges that parents are going to be negotiating or try to negotiate that demands a lot of their time and attention. And a lot of moms and dads will end up putting their own needs last. My guest, Natalie Bonfig, wants parents to resolve to put self-care at the top of their list in 2022 so that they can give the best of themselves to their demanding roles. Please welcome to the show, Natalie Bonfig.
Hi, Michelle.
Hi, Natalie.
Thank you very much for having me.
Oh, absolutely. So tell us about yourself, Natalie.
Well, the book is Everyday Self-Care and Your High Needs Child. It's really for almost any parent, but I raised a daughter with a genetic disorder, spent years and years and years researching what was going on with her, talking to different doctors, going to yearly conferences to learn what I could, just getting really, really, really involved in her healthcare. And I neglected myself very much so. And I had two other children that were very busy. They were in their own sports and their own activities. And so I was just running and always stressed out, always worried about the next diagnosis. And I eventually did have a nervous breakdown. And I felt called to write this book. Like, I just had to do it. It took me about 2.5 years on and off of planned time off, time away, planned doing it. And and it's a truly a dream come true for me. The first 6 chapters are really, it's kind of basic stuff that anybody could do. Breathe, find your quiet time, stay in the present moment, be kind to yourself, find positive outlets for your stress, and take care of your body. And so those are the first 6 chapters. And they really, you don't necessarily have to be the parent of a special needs child to get something out of it. I talk a lot about breath work. I breathe in and out to a 5 or 6 count throughout the day, all the time. In fact, I was at the doctor the other day and my blood pressure was like 143 over 84. And I didn't know why it was so high. And I sat there, closed my eyes, breathed in and out to a 5 count for about 10 minutes. They came back and it was 113 over 80. So you're deep breathing, and my cat's going to join us too. They can see her in the background.
That's okay.
But so breath work really helps. I mean, it really can help make a difference even in your blood pressure. So I just kind of refound that out the other day, and it was kind of something fun to share. Breathing can really calm me down.
It can. And, a lot of times I'm a nurse and we call that white coat syndrome usually, because just anybody going to the doctor's office, automatically their blood pressure raises up. So it's hard to say what it could have been at that time. So, as a parent, I know when my kids were young, you talked about going from sport, to sport and this meeting to that meeting and this club to that club. And so tell us a little bit more about your daughter and the demands that she had on your schedule and how you handled, going so many different places.
Yeah, well, she had a couple open heart surgeries. Her last one was while she was an undergraduate degree. Her first one was as a baby. She has Crohn's disease, which is also another pretty life-threatening disease. So we were always going to the doctor, and then we were trying to fit in. I mean, sometimes I brought her siblings with, and sometimes I didn't. It could be quite it was a lot to try to listen to the doctor and have 3 kids with me. So I used to try to go by myself. But it was a tough time just because I had so much going on. I wanted to keep everybody's life normal as possible. And my daughter with her health issues, she did sports and stuff too. So she, but yeah, I was always, grabbing dinner, going to the next thing, dropping off one person, picking up another person, and then trying to keep up with my research on what was going on with my daughter. Because by the time she had her heart surgery, I had been asked to help redo the clinical practice guidelines, and every health condition pretty much has a clinical practice guideline written by experts in that particular health issue. And so when they redid them in 2016, they wanted to have patient advocates on there. So I was in the cardiac section. And so I worked with doctors, like 15 doctors from all over the world who they took my opinions as much as their own. And it was pretty neat. So we kind of rewrote what doctors want girls to do that are that have a serious health condition, and they're at risk for an aortic dissection. That's what my daughter was at risk for.
Okay.
But yeah, it was it's just a crazy time, and you do anything for your kids, and you just don't think about yourself, and you don't realize how much stress you're under until it's just too late.
Sure.
It's just it's crazy. I still remember when my daughter came out of her the second open heart surgery, so she was just shy of 21, and her first words were like, "Mom, are you okay?" So
Aww.
yeah, it was really sweet.
Yeah.
So she was always thinking about me, making sure that I was okay too.
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
So tell me, I know when we were going from, school to sports to home and running around so much, it was really kind of hard to stay on any kind of healthy eating habit or program. How did you handle that? Because I know a lot of parents, they do all this fast food in between all of these different sports and events and meetings and stuff, and the weight just starts to pile on, and that adds health issues to the parent. So how did you handle that?
Well, my Nicole also has celiac disease. So when she was 7, and then so they would have been 5, 7, and 9. Then we had to change the way we ate. And celiac is our gluten, which is what your body reacts to in wheat and barley and other things, is what you need to avoid. So I actually cooked from scratch early on. I mean, my mom did too, but I just kind of I always made sure I had an early dinner ready, at 4:30 or 5 for the first group that was leaving. So because of the celiac, I always cooked from scratch, and it actually just made it healthier. Yeah, I mean, my son was probably the one that we went to McDonald's the most, and then I, steal the French fries as they went by. My mommy tax.
Right.
But I have to say, on a whole, because there's so gluten and processed foods, I just had to cook from scratch. And so it actually kind of made my life easier, knowing that I couldn't do a lot of the processed foods. I couldn't go to McDonald's and get, although the fries at McDonald's are cooked in a separate container, so you can't actually eat those. But a lot of times they mix what they fry the breaded stuff in, and you can't have stuff that's mixed in fryers. All kinds of fun information you learn when you have a child with a special diet.
Yes, sure. So at the beginning of the show, you kind of talked about the 6 chapters. You breezed over those. I'd like you to go back and let's talk about the 6 self-care tips that we can put into practice that can benefit our entire family.
Okay. Well, the first chapter is breathe. And, it's so easy, but by changing our breath, if you have a hyperventilator, which that's when I had my first panic attack, I did, I just focus on my breathing when I'm in traffic and, I'm frustrated. Now I live in Southern California where the traffic's really bad. And so, you just have to kind of breathe while you're while you're waiting. And, and you're waiting a lot when you have kids. You're waiting at the doctor, you're waiting to pick them up from school. You're waiting, waiting. And so that's what I say is a good time to focus on your breath, is while you're waiting. And it's also keeps you in the present moment. I mean, as parents, and especially if you have a child with a health issue, you future trip and you worry. And that's what is stressful, is how much worry. And so if you can stay in the present moment, by doing your breath work, or even by bringing a book. I bring a book everywhere. That's another thing that I do to kind of help distract myself when, I don't want to be thinking about something else. I read every night before I go to bed too. Mm-hmm. It's another really good thing. But so breath work's really important, and there's hundreds and hundreds of different kinds of breath work, but I just make it simple and I breathe in and out to 6 count. And that seems to really help me. One of the things is to find your quiet time. And I know that's really hard, with kids. And, I know my husband and I used to, have a couple bottles of wine after we got home from work. That was our quiet time. But I'm kind of talking more about a quiet time where you kind of go in your head and maybe do some meditation, and get out of the world. And that really, 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 really can help. And you can meditate to mantras. I actually meditate I count in and out to 5 count. I use that for everything. And so you can also, maybe while you're breathing, you can inhale love, exhale peace. There's guided meditations that you can do. You can sit silently for 20 minutes, kind of do what you need to do. But meditating it's just another amazing way to step out of that craziness in your head and just be at peace, breathing in and out. And it really helps your stress levels. It really, really, especially when you're in the hospital and things like that. I think mothers, we beat ourselves up. So be kind to yourself is one that I just found really, 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 really important, because we're so hard on ourselves. We have so much going on and we have so many responsibilities, and we make one mistake and then we're like, how come I did
right?
that? Dumb. And, it's just like, be nice to yourself. If you talk to other people half as mean as you talk, the way you talk to yourself, you wouldn't have any friends.
Right.
I mean, we're always just telling ourselves. So I really try hard to talk kindly to myself, and it sounds so simple, but it's exactly what you need to do, because if you talk negatively to yourself, nobody else is going to talk kindly to you, right. So you got to do it to yourself. But that's a really important one. And then, find positive outlets for your stress. And everybody, I interviewed 30 people for the book, 28 parents, and then 2 doctors. And, all the parents had different things to do. One parent started jogging, never had jogged before. Another mom likes to read, do furniture. That's what she does for stress relief. I've always read. I read a ton. I mean, that's what I spend hours and hours doing every week is reading. Mm-hmm. And, but yeah, find something that you like that relieves your stress, but doesn't add any more stress to you. I actually, one of the biggest things I do now that I'm in Southern California is I go for a walk to the beach every day. I'm about a 5-minute walk to the beach. And I got to say the ocean and the beauty of the ocean and the salty air and the breezes, there's nothing like it to,
for sure,
stress level. It's amazing. It really is. And I think the obvious one is taking care of your body, and just, I found out early on in my daughter's journey that getting a good night's sleep was just paramount to my own well-being, because there were times that, because I was so sleep deprived, mm-hmm. I didn't know what was going on, so getting a good night's sleep, eating healthy meals, drinking enough water, all the things that we read about, we see. If you do it, I mean, there are people that talk about, just staying healthy to prevent getting the flu or prevent getting COVID, are doing all these things of drinking enough water, getting enough sleep, eating
Right.
healthy meals,
Mm-hmm.
not, eating all the bad things that have gluten in them. I'm still not eating that much gluten. I'm so used to it. I feel like I'm cheating on my daughter if I have a Triscuit. Although she's coming out here, so I got to get a little bit better with my eating while she's here this next week. But yeah, so I just think that, I did such a good job of not taking care of myself. And, I try to talk to my kids now about, I didn't do a very good job of showing you how you need to take care of yourself, but you need to find ways to deal with your stress. And I know both my girls run and then nap. We're good nappers in our family.
Oh, that's good.
So, yeah. And so that's something that I found really important even years ago, was like, how do you deal with stress? Because, I wasn't always showing the best way to do it. I just would have these breakdowns because I'd get so upset. And then everything would come to a head and I'd cry or something would happen. So, but yeah, when you're a parent, it's tough. You gotta take the small moments that you can to take care of yourself.
Yes. And so when you were researching everything about your daughter's illness and how to take care of her, and of course, incorporating it into your life, did your other children go along with the dietary changes? Was it tough for them? How did they deal with that?
She's in the middle, so she's got an older sister and a younger brother. The older sister's she's always known what's going on, probably younger than she really should have known what was going on. My son he still to this day eats with one hand, and he leaves his right hand gluten-free.
Oh.
And he still eats that way even when he's not with her. It's just the cutest thing. I write about it in the book, but that's what he's always done. Because he will eat regular bread. We always had to have a few things for him, but then the rest of us just kind of got used to eating gluten-free, and now like the pasta's really reasonable. The bread's still, it's like, $6 or $7 for a teeny little loaf about that big. So the bread's really expensive. So I don't eat gluten-free bread unless, it's the only thing sitting there. But yeah, you kind of get used to it after a while. I eat gluten-free pretzels and,
Okay. So we do have to be very careful when we're asking Dr. Google stuff, because Dr. Google isn't always correct. So in doing your research, how did you do your research? Who did you turn to? And did you take any classes? How did you do all that?
So early on, I found the Turner Syndrome Society of the United States, and it's tssUS.org, excuse me. And they helped me, probably train me the best. As far as going online, and I write about it in my book, is that, there are tons of sites out there, but go to the ones that we know and trust, mayoclinic.com. There are really obvious ones that you're going to get the best information from. And I tell people with Turner syndrome, go to the turnersyndrome.org is another way to get to that website. And you'll get all the information that you need. Every year, the Turner Syndrome Society had a conference. When I actually ran the one that was in Minnesota in 2007 with 350 people, I did it as a volunteer. And yes, I'm that crazy to a 350 person conference as a volunteer.
Yeah.
But then we would get experts in the world of Turner syndrome. There's a doctor who I interviewed for this, Dr. Silverbach. He's a cardiologist that's the expert on the cardiac issues that affect girls with Turner syndrome. So he would come to the conferences. Mm-hmm. There's something called a nonverbal learning disability that most girls with Turner syndrome have a little bit of. And so we'd have psychologists talk to us about that and how we deal with in school and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
So we had specialists in every area. So I would get increasingly educated. And I remember at one point going to my daughter's cardiologist and saying, actually, this is what's wrong with her heart because of her Turner syndrome. And he said, no, it's not. And I said, I just got the most recent information at the Turner syndrome conference, but it wasn't published. And so it got published about 2 years later. And then I brought it and he said, oh, this is what you were talking about. And, and my husband was like, well, she's been telling you that for a long time. So my aunt, who's super sassy, and she likes to say, oh, do you practice brain surgery on the weekends? And so I told her, I told her my daughter's cardiologist what was wrong with her heart. So yes, I do.
Sure.
You know how some people, they just have their little sassy comments, and she finally had to stop saying it to me.
So we're talking about Turner syndrome. Could you tell us what were the signs and symptoms that your daughter exhibited that you even, you weren't sure, or how did they diagnose that?
Well, she did have open heart surgery right away, but girls with Turner syndrome, the classic symptom is a puffy hands, puffy feet, and then extra skin on their necks when they're born. So any medical student, that's what they'll learn in medical school, is to look for puffy hands, puffy feet. Well, she skinny little neck and had her aortic valve repaired, something called a valvotomy. They just literally opened her up, spread her chest, and opened up her valve with a scalpel. And that's a pretty common surgery. So they didn't link it to Turner syndrome until when she was between 2 and 3. She didn't grow at all. I mean, she didn't gain weight. She didn't grow in height. She was just this teeny little thing that was walking under tables. And that's when I started pushing it. Like, why isn't she growing? And then one doctor would say, oh, it's because of all her ear infections, because that's another Turner syndrome thing. And I was like, no, it's not because of that. And then the other one said, oh, it's because of her heart. And I'm like, no, and it's not because of that. And so the cardiologist was like, she's not growing. I go, I know. And what can we do next? And then, so he sent me to the endocrinologist, and that's where we got a blood test, and they did something called a karyotype, and they came back with the diagnosis of Turner syndrome. So it was one of those things where I was like, yes, that was right. And then I was like, oh, wow, this is more.
But I was right. Yeah. Right. we get that excitement of, yes, we love to be right, but then we're right. And it's like, oh yeah, we were right. Yeah. Maybe that's not how right we want it to be.
Well, yeah. And I talk a lot about mother's intuition. And I mean, for me, I followed my intuition. Her first cardiologist, he literally said, see you in 3 months. If I'd listened to him, she might've died.
Wow.
So I was like, nope, there's more wrong. I got to get a second opinion. Then she had open heart surgery right after that. So my mother's intuition has been spot on, and it's not anything that I've done special. It's just when you're so involved in your kids' lives, you just know what needs to be done. And even someone with an MD, and my daughter, the one with Turner syndrome, is in medical school right now.
Oh, wonderful.
So I keep trying to tell her she needs to really be open to alternative styles of, of treating people, because there's, acupuncture and a few things have been around millions of years. So she always kind of laughs at me and gets all uncomfortable. I actually prefer alternative medicine to conventional medicine, because I find today that, and I love my doctor friends, but many doctors are just so willing to write a prescription when there are alternatives. There's vitamins and natural products that, God made for us to take to make us better. So I do realize there are times when you do have to have a doctor. That's why God made them. But, there are times when we do need to trust our gut and know that we do know what's right for our child. I know as a parent, there were several times that I, wanted to trust my gut, but I was naive. I wasn't a nurse at the time. And I thought, maybe I should just, go with what the doctor says. And my son at 4 months old couldn't eat or drink anything. And it was a very difficult time. And I just happened to find this babysitter that just swaddled him and got him to eat and drink and just overrode everything the doctor said.
and got him nursed back to health. And, she didn't know him, but she told me her gut told her what to do as a mother. And it was incredible.
Wow. Yeah, that's amazing when that happens. I think early on in her journey, the cardiologist had misdiagnosed her. So I've been trying to be a partner with her doctors. When she was younger, there was a few I got rid of, like the ENT that she needed tubes, and that's common with girls with Turner syndrome, but it happened to be a minor part of what we were doing. And the ENT walked in, she said, compared to open heart surgery, tubes are a breeze. I burst into tears, and that was it. And I just went to wonder her partners, because that was all she said to me. It was
Oh, my son had 4 sets of tubes and finally had a permanent T tube that they put in, and stayed there for 4 years and had to be surgically removed when he was 8 years old. So I'm well versed on tubes. So we're going to hold that thought, and we're going to go to commercial, and we'll be right back.
Do you have a project or service that you want the world to know about? Or would you like to have your business or project highlighted during the show to a wide audience? If you would like to be a guest or sponsor of the show, please contact us at info@openpagespublishing.com. That's info@openpagespublishing.com.
Okay, we're back. So we're here today talking with Natalie Bonfig about ways parents can kind of put themselves first and their self-care first, because let's face it, it's a busy world and our kids are stretched from one end to the other, and we're in the middle trying to grab onto them and harness them and make sure that they're taken care of too. So Natalie, go ahead and tell us some more about maybe some examples of some of your parents. You said in your book you had interviewed, I believe it was 28 parents.
Yep.
What are some more suggestions that they gave to share?
Well, the last part 4 is thoughts and advice from medical parents, and I asked these are the questions I asked everybody: how they dealt with unhelpful comments, how can you tell you need self-care, what surprised you the most about yourself, what you would do differently, and advice for parents, and then final thoughts. And I can just kind of pull open and kind of share a couple of what people had said. But I had, there were quite a few parents of girls with Turner syndrome, and because Turner syndrome is a syndrome, which means collection of diagnoses, there's tons of diagnoses in there. So some of the girls have diabetes, as well as what else? Now I'm losing my train of thought. But dealing with unhelpful comments. So, here's one. Platitudes. I also detest the comment, you and your husband were chosen by God to be special needs parents. I've seen some awful special needs parents as well as great ones, says Diana, mom to Brett. And then another pet peeve is when people ask, how do you do it? I just say things like, you have to do it to do in your life. If it was your child, you would do the same. People stare at us the rare times we're out, and sometimes their children move aside as if my daughter being in a wheelchair is contagious. I feel like saying it's not contagious.
Right.
A lot of unsolicited advice, oh, she's perfect. There's nothing wrong with her. Her behavior is fine and completely normal. And that's maybe when your child has some Asperger's type behavior, which is common in Turner syndrome. How can you tell when you need self-care? Well, and this one, for me, it was high emotions. I knew when I was like losing it, I'd lose it over something small. That's when I'd get on the phone with the insurance company and I'd start crying, and I knew that I'd had a bad day and it was time to just get off the phone.
Right.
One of the people talk about how much they yell and they can tell. Another is when you get really foggy and your mental clarity is really bad. I know for me, that's one of the ones, especially right after you have the baby, you have that postpartum kind of, and I remember the doctors trying to explain to me what was going on with my daughter. And I was just like, I don't even have a brain right now. I can't, I had my first panic attack after my daughter was diagnosed with Turner syndrome.
Mm-hmm.
I think a lot of the moms talk about being consumed by worry, and that's how you know you need self-care. You know what's surprised about your this one Leslie, mom to Louise, who's a recovering alcoholic, replied that she surprised herself by being stronger and more capable than I ever realized. I'm kind of a badass. I'd like that one.
I love it.
One mom did say with tongue in cheek, what surprised me most was that I didn't have a nervous breakdown.
Yeah.
My son had type 1 diabetes. There's also kids with autism in this group.
Mm-hmm.
Resilient Lori, mom to Carter with TS and is transgender, answered, the experience with health issues prepared me for the gender identity change. You learn to accept difficulty. Difficulty is not something you can reject. Difficult things can change you for the better. People say it must be hard for you. What is hard? Having a child who wants to die. What is great is seeing my child as happy as he is, that he is living the life he wants to lead. Healthy life choices cannot filter what a life should be through their own lenses. So another mom to Stephanie, who's a recovering heroin addict, replied, the first word that comes to my mind is resiliency.
Wow.
People hear my story, particularly those who have dealt with the perils of addiction. They ask me, how did you get through this? And how did you maintain a job? As I look back, I'm very careful not to make the current situation a horrible summation of all the things that occurred. Today needs to be a new day, not out of ignorance, but out of hope. I kind of added parents of kids with addiction and substance abuses and also mental health issues, because I realized that there's a lot of parents out there with high needs children.
Yes.
And, you know, what people would do differently. One of the women who was a counselor said she would have gone to more counseling.
Oh, wow.
That was a good one. You know, like I didn't end up doing early intervention, and I'm glad I didn't because she didn't need it. But some of the parents regret doing that.
Mm-hmm.
There's one mom, she kind of explained the same thing with me as what I did, is we just took over and our husbands weren't really involved.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe if we'd shared some of the stress, maybe it wouldn't have been so hard on us.
Okay.
You know, so that's like something I might do differently. You know, and staying positive and thinking long term, because, you know, I just worried. I remember worrying about things that never ended up happening. I worried about Nicole
Mm-hmm.
wasn't going to have very many friends. And then when she was in high school and she had a party and she had like 5 people over, and then the front room was covered in like 40 shoes, I knew she had friends.
Wow.
You know? And I worried about her not being able to do sports, and she did sports, and I worried and I worried and I worried. So not worrying, you know, and advice for parents, you know, create and depend on your own support system. And that is the family of your own choosing. And sometimes it's your blood family. And if you're lucky enough to have family help out and be there, good for you. And just tell them thank you a lot.
Yes.
Because not a lot of people have that, actually, you know, and I advocated. I went out and learned about Turner syndrome, and part of what I felt like I had to do is I had to help educate the rest of the world, which helped my daughter, which helped me, which helped everybody else with Turner syndrome. And so advocacy is another great thing to do.
Right.
You know, I think parenting differently. I do tell my kids that if you were being raised now, we wouldn't be in as million of activities that we were in. We were constantly on the go, and we didn't have to be. We didn't have to be. I mean, you know, I think they all would have graduated from college if they hadn't, you know, had swimming lessons every day for
right.
Although swimming is really important, so maybe I'd cut out something else. But, you know, I think one of the things that the advice that one of the moms has is find time to grieve. And I think, I know early on in our journey, it was just before she was diagnosed with Turner syndrome, with a minister from the children's hospital came and spoke to our Parents for Heart group. And she talked about how the grief, it's a circle and it gets bigger, but 10 years from now, you may still feel that same pain that you felt when you heard your child wasn't perfect.
Yes.
And it can still stop you. And as much therapy as I've done, I'm still stopped at times.
Right.
You know, walking into the hospital for the first time, and it's like you have PTSD, and you just can't help it. Your reactions. But yeah, so there's a lot of great advice in here, and you know, the parents are really honest, you know, just about how it's not easy, and you know, and there's some lessons from the kids because they're pretty wise, and you know, and I talk about like self-care during emergencies when you have to go to the hospital at the last minute, and that's what so many of them seem like they are. You know, you're going to the hospital, you don't know how long you're going to be there. You could be there a few hours, you could be there a few days. You know,
right.
What do you know? But just trying to, you know, help your child as much as you can, but also trying to keep yourself as calm as you can. And I was lucky. My daughter, like, we talked about white coat syndrome earlier. She didn't have any of that. But I would say 80% of the other girls that I knew with TS actually did have white coat syndrome.
Oh, wow.
And so, you know, you're trying to get an MRI done on your kid who's screaming, and they have to knock them out. And so I was really pleased that we did not have that. She was an easy going kid. None of the tests were a big deal. And so I was really fortunate. But white coat syndrome is a huge thing with kids that go to the doctor a lot. They just, you know, they see that white coat and they can't help it. So
right. So in your research, I'm curious, did you find what were the percentages on boys versus girls having Turner syndrome?
Well, right now the clinical practice guidelines say that it's only girls and women that have Turner syndrome.
Okay.
But genetics is a very complicated thing. And so girls are XX, boys have Y material that makes them a boy. But there are girls with Turner syndrome that have Y material as far as their genetic makeup. And so when that happens, most of the time they need to get their ovaries, their gonads removed because there's a chance of cancer.
Okay.
Now there's more and more boys that are being diagnosed with Turner syndrome. And it's kind of put the community a bit in an uproar because it's always been only women, only girls. And so that's something that some of the experts, the doctors, they need to change that in the clinical practice guidelines, but it's not changed yet. And it's causing because of issues on social media. So there's separate groups of moms of boys, and so you actually brought up a controversial topic.
Well, we won't go too deep into that, but okay. We won't go too deep into that. So tell us again the name of your book and the ways that our viewers can get in contact with you.
It's Everyday Self-Care and Your High Needs Child. And it's Natalie Brobin, Brobin. And my website is everydayself-care.com. And I have a lot of articles that I've written on there. Talk about actually another book that I'm part of, the Epiphanies Project. That's on there. Actually published 2 books this year, so it's kind of been a big year.
Good.
But so my thing is getting parents to take care of themselves and not to completely do nothing for themselves so that when their kids are gone, because now I'm an empty nester and single, and you know, it's like, oh, I have to do all this stuff now. I don't have the kids to distract me. It's just me, you know?
Right.
And you realize, wow, I should have been doing a lot more of this as I was raising my kids, you know? And so that's what I hope to impart, and just because parenting, at one point or another, your child's going to be a high needs child, whether it's they're going through a difficult breakup. I mean, there's going to be a point, you know, just a typical teenager when they yell at you and they don't want to talk to you, and when you're really dumb, and then all of a sudden you're smart again.
Yeah, I know. When my kids were small, I seemed to be really smart. And then they got into those teenage years up to about 19 or 20, and I was a dumb as a rock. It's a wonder I could do anything. After 20, I became smart again. So, it seems like now they're in their late 30s and I'm just a genius. So
Oh, of course. I used to
now I have grandkids and I look pretty smart to them because they're young. So it's it all works like full circle.
And if you need help with your phone, have your grandkids help you. Don't have your kids because they'll make fun of you. I used to say to my daughter, the oldest one, to the other two, I go, "Oh, your sister doesn't think I'm very smart right now, but in a couple of years, all of a sudden I'm going to be so smart again."
Absolutely, yes. It's amazing how that goes full circle. It really is, and it, like you said, it really doesn't matter if your child is a high needs child or not. Like you said, when it comes to those breakups, when it comes to their first job or their first test that they fail, I mean, the whole world comes to an end anyways. So it really doesn't matter. But in taking care of ourselves, we not only need to learn how to take care of ourselves, we need to be that example for our children. Because I'm finding a lot of kids today do not have good coping skills, do not have good self-care skills. And when you look at their parents, you kind of know why. So it's very important for us as parents to learn these coping skills and to put ourselves first, because, I was always told if you can't take care of yourself, you certainly can't take care of someone else.
Right.
So you definitely have to put yourself first. Is there anything else that you'd like for the viewers to know?
No, it's that self-care isn't a luxury, and it's not a bad thing. It's necessary. I think I used to look at the moms that you could tell they went to the gym all the time. Their nails were beautifully done and they always looked great. And I thought, what is she doing? She looks too good. And then I realized, like, what is wrong with me that I'm judging some woman who's taking care of herself?
Right.
We're the worst. Women are the worst to each other. And so you have to forget about what anyone else is doing and just focus on yourself. And it's good for your kids to see you put yourself first every once in a while. I don't know how much I did good for my kids showing them that they always came first and that I sacrificed everything for them. I don't know if that's a good thing to learn. They need to learn that, there are other people that are important in this world too, besides themselves, and the world doesn't revolve around them. So those are some of the things that I think, practicing good self-care really can help you help your kids.
For real. I know I'm a big advocate of affirmations. And as a coach, I, teach people to say affirmations all throughout the day. And I know, like you said earlier in the conversation, that, we look at ourselves in the mirror and we cut ourselves down constantly. We don't like the way our hair looks today. We don't like the way these jeans look, or, there's always something that we cut ourselves down about. And it's time that we, take that energy back and make it positive energy and say, I am beautiful. I am worth it. And I am a good mother. I am a good father. And to really take charge and put that out there. And I believe we should teach our kids affirmations as well. Now, have you utilized any affirmations in your journey?
There's a yoga song that's I'm beautiful, I'm bountiful, what's the other word that I like to say, that I took through yoga teacher training. Once you kind of get on this path of the yogic and meditation, and you start kind of taking a lot of the same classes. Yeah. So I'm a meditation person and a yoga instructor, and I'm a recovery coach, and, whatever I can do to help my message, help the world is kind of where I'm at.
That is awesome. Again, go ahead and tell us your contact information, the name of your book, and where to get your book.
Everyday Self-Care and Your High Needs Child. And you can find it on Amazon. You can find it on Barnes & Noble, Target, any online place. And my website is up there, everydayselfcare.com. Lots of blog articles. transitioning more into everyday self-care for everybody, but there's a lot of articles about everyday self-care and your high needs child, because that's what I started writing about. I just wrote one about having COVID. Had COVID back in October, and it was interesting. People don't talk about having COVID like it's a big secret.
Right.
So I write articles about that I put on my blog as well. So
Okay.
yeah, keep myself out of trouble.
So what's next for Natalie Bonfig?
Well, I'm thinking about writing a book, everyday self-care while grieving.
Okay.
My best friend died by suicide about 6.5 years ago.
Oh.
And that's what really brought me kind of down. And I had to kind of rewire everything.
Sure.
And learn who I wanted to be in the future, because her death really, really shocked me. So a lot of us have lived with a lot of grief over the last couple of years. So this is not a topic that it will be hard to find people to talk to.
Right.
I do happen to know someone whose son died on the same day as my girlfriend. And so she will be the first person that I will interview. But yeah, so that's my plan. And to cover all the different areas that people, losing your spouse, going through a divorce, losing someone to death, suicide, all the different kind of big areas of our lives, and some smaller areas, because you grieve with life changes, your
Yes.
job, getting done with college. I mean, exciting things there can be grief involved, like being done with college, getting a new job. My kids have been going through that, and that's been interesting watching them,
Empty nesting.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Everybody thinks you should be so happy the kids are gone, and then all of a sudden it's like the kids are gone. I'm not so happy.
I still went to my friends' kids' stuff, high school stuff. I missed it so much. I was going to band concerts, and I was going to sporting events, and I was like, what are you doing? I'm like, I miss it.
Right. Yeah, we take a lot of things for granted, for sure. And when they're gone, it's kind of like, wow, now what? That's how a lot of marriages end, because they were so wrapped up in their children, and then when the children are gone, the parents didn't take that self-care time and their time together, and they're so far apart that there's just no saving it. So it's really sad.
Yeah, and I think you and I obviously talked enough about that to know. And I don't know how much, we were married 31 years, and the divorce happened, after her second open heart surgery. But I imagine the way we dealt with all of that is part of, why we got a divorce, even though it was a little bit later, but, and divorce rates really high in families who have a sick kid, or they've lost a child to death. So it's like 80-90%. So I'm like, whatever.
Yeah. Right.
I did the best.
Well, Natalie, I want to thank you for being on the show. And I appreciate you sharing your book and your thoughts and all those self-care tips. And I really hope that everybody utilizes those.
Thank you so much. It was great to be on here. Thanks, Michelle.
Good. So if you'd like to be a guest or a sponsor on the show, make sure to contact me at info@openpagespublishing.com. That's info@openpagespublishing.com. This is Michelle Bannister, reminding you to start today and live the life you were meant to live.